Good day, ma'am and classmates. We are the Group 3 and we are here to present the Lesson 15 entitled Fingerprint Comparison and Lesson 16 which is Fingerprint Identification and Presentation of Evidence in Court. By the way, I'm Karen Galoche and today I will introduce to you the presenters of Group 3. First, Mr. Forton will talk about fingerprint comparison and methods of comparison of Latin print and standard print. Ms. Galoche, yours truly, will discuss the comparing minute or another term known as Galton's points by David Ashbaugh, which is the ACE-V method. Mr. Jangayo will tackle the 3 levels to complement the ACE-V method. Mr. Hiss will classify and discuss the different methods of fingerprint processing and identification. In the Lesson 16, Ms. La Rosa will discuss the fingerprint identification and nature of range characteristics for absolute identification. Ms. Malaka will identify the expert and its qualification. And lastly, Ms. Malonas will explain the identical points necessary to be admitted as fingerprint evidences in court. So, let's start with our first presenter.
Everyone, I'm Cadet RBG Fortune and I will discuss fingerprint comparison and method of comparison of Latin print and standard print. Fingerprint comparison. It is a process of a careful and truthful comparison of 2 or more fingerprint into each range characteristic to establish its similarities or dissimilarities. Method of Latin print and standard print. 1. Ordinary method. Ordinary method. This is the marking of the point of identify and after another which is drawn to the margin of the photograph. Latent and standard print. Designed by number arranged in conclusive order and in clockwise direction. Kinds of ordinary method. A. Simple method. Simple method. The 2 print are enlarged at the same size. The identical point then be identified by putting a straight line in red ink to the margin. Then the identified range characteristics are numbered in conclusive order. The numbering of the point must start with either the delta or core. If the core is assigned to the number 1, the number 2 will be the next range characteristic and so on until you have the numbered all identical points of both enlargement. B. Modified method. Modified method, the same process or procedure method except that instead of assigning number to each point, initial letter of the range characteristic is indicated, for example, C for core, D for delta, B for verification, and the like. C. Drawn method. In this method, after the straight line is established and the numbered are placed about 1 centimeter at the end of the line of the margin, a circle with at least 1 inch diameter is drawn inside the circle with be drawn range characteristic pointed by the line. Born method. The 2 enlarged photograph which has a size of 8 by 10 inches are divided into square, both exactly alike with the square, occupying the identical position on each examining them in their order, square to square, designing the identical point in each square. The Osborne grind method involves making photographic enlargement of 2 fingerprints to be compared with a superimposed grid on each. The grid cell are then compared cell by cell. If all available characteristics in each cell match, identification is declared. 3. Seymour method. This method is done by making first skeleton tracing the question print that and that of the standard print of the suspect. By making comparison, place them together by holding it near reflector or side light or projector. Then make the necessary identification of each range characteristic whether they are the same or not. Number 4, pricking method. Make an enlargement of the same size of the change impression and the suspect standard print. Place the photograph of the standard print over the change impression in the same position. With the use of a needle pricking identification point to determine or coincide with one another. Pricking method which use of a needle pricking identical point to determine if they are coincide with one another. Make enlargement of the same size of the change impression and the suspect standard print. Place the photograph of the standard print over the change impression in the same position.
Good day, everyone. I'm Karen Galache, and today I will discuss about comparing minutae, or other known as Galton's points. So when we say ASV, it is a scientific method for examination and documentation of latent fingerprints. It's also the most common method of fingerprint examination worldwide. Fingerprint examiners use the ASV method to reach and determine on each print. ASV stands for analysis, comparison, evaluation, and verification. So, the purpose of the ASV method is to give more structure and objectivity to print comparison for sound practice. So, do you have any idea, guys? Who is this man? This man is David Ashbur. He introduced the ASV method in 1980s. A renowned Canadian fingerprint expert, since then, it became the most common method of fingerprint examination worldwide. He also coined the term radiology in 1982. He wrote a fundamental text on the subject, Qualitative Friction Ridge Analysis. He published also detailed discussion of radiology methods, including poroscopy, idioscopy, pressure distortion, and problem print analysis. So here are the 4-step process of the ASV examination method. First, analysis. This consists of the objective, qualitative, and quantitative assessment of the Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3 details to determine their proportion, interrelationship, and value to individualize. So, here in analysis, the forensic technician assesses the unknown print to determine if it can be used for a comparison. This step involves the preliminary assessment of several factors like the surface material or the substance of the print itself. Next is comparison. It is the objective examination of the attributes observed during analysis in order to determine agreement or discrepancies between two friction ridge expressions. Here in comparison, the examiner analyzes characteristic. When we say attributes of the fingerprints, these are the physical features such as recurves, deltas, creases, and scars. So, she identifies conformities between the found and the known latent prints. Known prints are often collected from victims, others present at the scene, or through a search of one or more fingerprint databases such as the FBI's Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or IAFIS, or the Office of Biometric Identity Management's IDENT. Next is evaluation. Evaluating all the information contained in the latent print, specifically the uniqueness and individuality of the print, the clarity, and the quality. Here in evaluation, the examiner decides if the prints are from the same source. The same source are the identification or individualization. Different sources, those are exclusion or are inclusive. Next is verification. All work, as in any science, must be subject to review. This portion of the process employs such peer review, consultation with other experts to verify the opinion of the original examiner is undertaken at this point. Should there be disagreement regarding the identification, a third person may be used for verification purposes. Here in verification, if an identification is made, the conclusion must be verified by another fingerprint examiner. This step ensures the objective application of the method and confirms the results of the first technician. The second examiner may also verify the suitability of determinations made in the analysis phase.
Good day everyone, I'm Alfredo Angayo Jr. and our topic for today is the 3 level to complement the ACE-B method. Let's start to level 1. Level 1 is sufficiency and clarity of information. Comforting the examiner, is there enough information, pattern, type, flow, and range. Characteristic to ensure the quality of the print, it is suitable print. Level 2. The spatial relationship and the type of characteristic of within the pattern are used to determine that known and unknown were made by the same individual. The last level is level 3. The radiology and fluoroscopy. At this level, the study of structure of the ridge and the pores within the ridge is undertaken. Level 3 information in the latent print is often absent due to the quality of print. The lack of the level 3 information does not mean the individualization cannot be made when all the levels of information have been assessed and the ACE-B process has been undertaken and appropriate conclusion can be arrived at by the latent print examiner.
Good day, ma'am. I will discuss the methods of fingerprint processing and identification. FINDER, Fingerprint Reader System. This is capable of performing latent print searching automatically. The system locates minute data consisting of the location of the fingerprint ridges. Ridge endings are print of bifurcation. The minutae for a given fingerprint are converted to digital data and then stored in this form in the fingerprint file. When a latent print is obtained from the crime scene, the computer locates all identifying minutes. It is then fed to a matcher that compares the latent print to any number of other known fingerprint patterns. Fingerprint readers do exactly what their name describes, using their optical capacitive or ultrasound sensor technology. They measure the characteristics of a fingerprint. Fingerprint biometrics are a common modality for performing criminal background checks for individuals seeking to work in public trust. Automated Fingerprint Identification System. This is the modified version of the FINDER adopted by most states and countries of law enforcement agencies. AFIS can effectively compare latent prints with a 300,000 file database or can match prints in less than 15 minutes. At rate of 1,200 seconds, the machine can search 1 million fingerprint matches. This machine can also digitalize fingerprint information to produce inkable fingerprints. It's the process of using a computer to match fingerprints against a database of known and unknown prints, and the fingerprint identification system. AFIS is primarily used by law enforcement agency for criminal identification purposes. The most important of which is the identification of a person suspected of committing a crime or linking a suspect to other involved crimes. Live scan fingerprint process. This records stones and transmit fingerprints digitally. This allows police to place a suspect's fingers on a glass plate, which then read by the special device to produce a digital image of the prints. This technology has virtually eliminated the taking of poor quality ink fingerprints. So, it's the process of capturing fingerprints electronically. Live scan is a digital fingerprint process that replaces traditional ink. Fingerprinting in the states where it's available, an applicant's fingerprints are securely transmitted to a government agency which performs a criminal history background check using an AFIS. Laser fingerprinting. This method also eliminates the mess of ink fingerprints and also other problems associated with them. One application of this method is that thin chemical pad is attached directly to the citation box and is used for suspects or drivers without proper identification. It can be used quickly and easily for taking prints at the scene. So, the most common device used for the detection of latent fingerprints on difficult surface is the argon laser. The surface impinged when the finger mark is illuminated with a blue-green beam from the air laser. Before it strikes the surface, the beam is made to pass through a lens.
Good day, ma'am. Today I'm going to discuss about the fingerprint identification. So first, what is fingerprint identification? Two prints must have the same general pattern in order to give a positive identification. They must also have a certain number of common ridge characteristics. This number can vary depending on how common the characteristics and how much of the print is available. So when we say fingerprint identification, ito ay nag-identify ng fingerprint ng isang tao. At dapat yung fingerprint niya ay may parehong pattern at nagbibigay ng positive identification. And yung number ng common characteristics ay nakadepende sa print na available. And mayroong dalawang main methods ang fingerprint identification. First is minutia-based techniques. Minutia-based techniques first find the minutia points, then map the relative placement on the finger to match ridge characteristics. Another is the correlation-based techniques is able to overcome some of the difficulties of the minutia-based approach. These techniques requires the precise location of a registration point and are affected by image translation and rotation. So, yung minutia-based techniques, dapat una nating hanapin ay ang minutia points. Then, next ay yung map na mayroong relative placement sa kamay ng magmamatch sa ridge characteristics. And then, the second one is the correlation-based techniques. Yung correlation-based techniques naman ay nag-overcome ng mga difficulties na minutia-based approach. Next is the nature of ridge characteristics for absolute identification. Fingerprints are compared to each other by examining the minutia to determine whether the same minutia are present, the minutia flow in the same direction, the minutia occupy the same relative positions to each other.
Okay, so I will discuss the topic about an expert, a fingerprint expert, and the qualifications of fingerprint expert. Who is an expert? An expert is generally defined as any person who is skilled in specific science occupation. Because of this particular knowledge, the expert is qualified to analyze or compare set of facts and render an option based upon those facts This opinion is permitted because of the expert's knowledge, which the layperson generally does not possess. When we say expert or eksperto, ito ay tao na sanay or bihasa sa tiyak na agham. Dahil sa partikular na kaalaman, ang eksperto ay kwalipikado para pag-aralan o kumpara ang takdang katunayan at magbibigay ng option-based sa ganong katunayan. A fingerprint expert. A fingerprint expert is a person who through experience, training, education has a complete knowledge and skill in science of fingerprints, and if called upon by courts to testify, can externalize that knowledge and skill in a forceful manner, yet convincing and intelligent manner. Ang eksperto sa fingerprint ay sa pamamagitan ng karanasan, pagsasanay, edukasyon na may kaalaman at kasanayan sa agham ng fingerprint. Qualification of fingerprint expert. It is imperative that the expert be knowledgeable in all phases of fingerprint science, history, classifications, latent procedures, and scientific publications. Kailangan na ang eksperto ay marunong sa lahat ng mga yugto ng fingerprint, sensya, mga klasifikasyon, nakatagong mga fingerprint experts are also a latent print examiners and use their exceptional knowledge to analyze fingerprint clues left at the crime scenes. The fingerprint experts offers a expert opinion based on his training and experience, and a thorough examination of all details of the fingerprints, as to whether there is a match or identification. They may be called on to testify in court as a witness called as expert witness. Ito ay nangangahulugan na ang eksperto sa fingerprint ay also mga nakakatagong mga tagasuri at ginagamit ang kanilang pambihirang bakas ng kaalaman sa daliri sa pagsalugar ng krimen.
Identical points necessary to be admitted as fingerprint evidence in court. Number 1. There are more than 12 evident points and the impression is clear. The identification is absolute. Number 2. There are between 8 and 12 evident points. Identification certainly depends upon clearness of the type and rarity of the type. Number 3. Presence of the core and delta of the part which is acceptable. Thus, the fingerprint evidence admissible as evidence in court. Fingerprint is considered the gold standard of forensic science and are widely thought to be an especially powerful and indisputable form of evidence. Yes, fingerprint found at the scene of the crime are admissible to identify the accused as guilty. After all, fingerprints are marks which cannot be counterfeited, nor can be disguised or hide away. Admissibility of fingerprint testimony. Experts' testimony as to the identity of thumb marks or fingerprint is admissible. If thumb impressions are blurred and many of the characteristic marks far from clear, thus rendering it difficult to trace the features enumerated by experts showing the identity of the impression, the court is justified in refusing to accept the opinion that is distinct similarity in some respects between the admitted genuine thumb mark and the questioned thumb mark is evident. When we say expert testimony, these are the opinions stated during the trials or deposition or a testimony under oath before trial by an expert witness. Kapag blur o hindi visible o klaro ang characteristic ng marks, mahihirapan yung expert na identify yung impression ng fingerprint. Therefore, pwedeng i-refuse o hindi tanggapin ng korte yung opinion sapagkat may pinagkaiba between the admitted genuine thumb mark and the questioned thumb. Magiging pruweba lamang ang fingerprint ng suspect kung nandun siya nang mangyari ang krimen. It may be sufficient proof to identify to sustain conviction.